Hello and welcome. You're watching the France 24 debate. I'm François Picard. Thanks but no thanks. The Spanish government refusing so far a bailout from Brussels as it unveiled this Thursday a 2013 budget that comes complete with a fresh round of belt-tightening. A press conference originally scheduled for early afternoon finally took place at 5 p.m. Markets believe it's only a matter of time before Spain puts in that request. True, the conditions of a bailout have to be fleshed out in full with creditors in Brussels, Berlin, and elsewhere. But it's the voters who also have to get used to the idea. Already in a country where nearly 25% of the workforce is unemployed, they've been protesting against austerity in a demonstrative fashion this week. National pride is at stake, and some even see this as the beginnings of an implosion. On September 11th, more than 1 million turned out in favor of Catalonian separatism in Barcelona, and early elections there could lead to an independence referendum. It's no wonder the Economist Intelligence Unit says Spanish society is currently experiencing one of its most unstable periods since the end of the Franco era. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Spain under siege, and with us, Barcelona-born attorney Edouard Salza. Thank you for being with us. You're with the firm of Squire Sanders here in Paris. Also with us, Ludovic Subran, chief economist at Euler Hermes, or Hermes or Hermes? Hermes, there you go. Sofiane Aboura teaches finance at Paris' prestigious Dauphine University. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. Joining us from Brussels, Tony Cruyanes, Paris correspondent for TV3. Thank you for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook, and on Twitter you can find us at François F24. Now, Tony, before we went on air, Edouard Salsas reassured me here. He said that 2 p.m. press conferences that start at 5 is nothing unusual in Madrid. Nonetheless, they must have spent quite a long time preparing what they were going to say.
Well, definitely, and at the same time, it was, I would say, it took ages for them to come to the press, but at the same time, it wasn't. It was very easy to find a comment from the European Commission, which means that probably they were actually more on the telephone just before coming to the press to tell us the news and actually the welcome that has received from Brussels. This news, which the budget for the next year and the complete package that was announced today in reforming part of the Spanish economy is more than welcome in Brussels. So, well, but it's true. I mean, being a bit late in Spain is nothing new.
You say it's welcome. Why is that?
Well, because they've been pushing the Spanish government to announce that for ages, well, all the news that came today from Madrid in terms of the economies that they are doing for next year, we're talking about 39 billion euros. Well, all the austerity measures that were announced were measures that were waited for long from the European Commission and, of course, from Paris, from Berlin. So this is exactly what the Spanish government was supposed to do. It took ages for them to do it. There were excuses on the way. One of them was the elections in the southern region of Andalusia a few months ago, and of course it wasn't easy for a government who, as you've talked about before already, is facing challenges both in Catalonia and in the streets in Madrid. So it's not easy for them to announce it.
And no hard feelings over the fact that they haven't formally asked for cash?
Well, there are hard feelings, I'm sure, from parts of Europe that are actually waiting for the moment. Everybody assumed that at some point it's going to happen. The question is not if, but when and how. We'll see. We'll see. The Prime Minister of Spain, which just came from New York, said there before addressing the United Nations Assembly that if it was difficult for them to sell the sovereign bonds in the markets in the next few days, it would then be the time to ask for a rescue. We'll see.
Let me ask you at this point, Edouard Salzas, if it's a question of when.
Well,
how soon will they ask for a bailout?
We don't know yet. We believe, at least the government believes, that they can still hold the situation and they can still get on the track, but everybody is waiting for it.
Everyone's waiting. Ludovic Subran, your thoughts, your prediction?
No, they will.
But when?
They will. Well, I think give them a couple more weeks.
A couple of weeks.
Of course, what's happening is that you don't have to mix the sequence here. It's normal for a government to present its law of finance by the end of the year. So it's not, it's not a question of lack of sovereignty. They have to do it anywhere. So the next step is, of course, that it's not enough. Everybody knows it, because it's not a question just by announcing, 40 billion is pretty much for a country like Spain. Just to give you an idea, this type of adjustment is never seen in history. And the only adjustment that we have that are this size, 3 percentage points of public deficit to be adjusted in less than, a year or so, 2 years, is, something that will trigger necessarily social unrest and the type of problem that we see now with this recessionary spiral, no? The question is more than, the bigger problem with the non-performing loans in the banking sector that has to be sanitized. We're talking here about 17 points of GDP, 170 billion euros that are, at stake. And the recap that is supposed to be announced by the private audit is about 60 billion.
So proportionally, is it worse than what Ireland had to go through, or Greece?
It's very different, because Spain is a Japanese case. Basically, you had a concentration in the construction sector, and you had an overheating of Spain that basically is causing now the complete deletion of both the social and industrial fabric in the country. So I guess in Ireland, it's a question really of tightening the belt. In Spain, you have two problems at the same time. Spain has had the recession, full-fledged. Then they had a domestic crisis, an idiosyncratic crisis, this, bubble that pricked in the real estate sector. And now they're in a situation where the sovereign debt is the major issue. So if you cumulate all of this, you're in a situation of a perfect storm, and therefore the instruments and the solution ought to be varied. It's a multifaceted problem. It requires a set of instruments, including the support from the European Commission, the European Union, one way or another.
All right, an unprecedented situation going into the budget presentation. The government promising to reduce the deficit from 6.3% of GDP this year to 4.5% next year. That's already a big belt tightening. And this Thursday, they spelled out a laundry list of measures to come.
Everything we're doing when developing economic policies, and it is reflected in this document, is what we are convinced is necessary to take Spain out of the crisis. We need to cut public debt, we need to make structural reforms, we need to restructure the financial market. These are the commitments we're making today, and they are, I'll repeat, essential to fix the imbalances of the Spanish economy and will enable economic growth.
Sofiane Aboura, we've done a lot of debates here about Greece. We've seen the movie before when it comes to Greece. When you hear statements like that one from a politician, what are your thoughts?
I think it is very resembling to what has been done in Greece, but the proportion in Greece was much higher because there is no productive economy in Greece. Therefore, the effort was very tough. But just to answer precisely your previous question, I would say that I wait for the bailout around October, maximum November, if I'm not wrong, of course. For a very simple reason, is that my belief is that the Spanish Prime Minister is waiting for the activation of the European mechanism system. This is an opportunistic attitude from the government, because if the bailout comes from the European mechanism system.
So hold on, let me interrupt you here. So there was Mario Draghi, the head of the ECB, who announced there'd be this unprecedented system by which they could issue bonds and everything. And now the system has now the system has to be put in place. Is that it?
Two things. The outright monetary transaction proposed by Mario Draghi will considerably help short and middle-term debt issued by these countries, because it will decrease the interest rate. First point. Second point, the institutional mechanism that will replace the European Financial Stability Fund, which is called European Mechanism System, that should have been activated in this July, but because of the German Justice, Supreme Court, there is some delay. I believe, my personal belief is that the Spanish Prime Minister is waiting for the package to come through this European mechanism system and affect directly the bank for a simple reason. Because if he has the alternative, if he accepts the alternative, which is right now accepting the package, the cash from the European Commission, there will be a jump in the public debt of Spain. But if it comes through the European mechanism system, it will not pass through the Spanish government, but directly to the bank capitalization. It makes the difference for our conservatives.
He's not saying go until he absolutely has to. Should be said though that the pressure really is increasing this week on Spain, and even though it's got an army of unemployed, it spends more right now on the servicing of the debt than it does on unemployment. And with bond rates rising again above 6%, there you see the chart. Spain is back above the 6% mark on Wednesday. And by the way, it's not just the markets that are growing impatient with Mariano Rajoy. He must spell out what the situation is. Michael Meister, this is the finance spokesperson for Angela Merkel, saying the fact that he's not doing so shows Rajoy evidently has a communications problem. If he needs help, he must say so. Where you are right now, Tony Cruañez in Brussels, are you hearing a lot of such remarks?
Well, I completely agree, and I think Mariano Rajoy has been trying a strategy which has been, look, Spain is the fourth largest economy in the Eurozone. You can't, we need your help, but we're not going to ask you if you don't give us assurances that is going to be in the best possible conditions. This is why all this waiting. It's true that the Spanish government is trying to get the money to rescue the Spanish banks through this new mechanism. The problem is that yesterday, for example, we heard how the Dutch, the German, and the Finns said that they were not going to get all the money that is needed for the Spanish banks, just losing it. I mean, it's going to count as a Spanish debt. This is something the Spanish government was trying to avoid. At the same time, we've got another problem here, and it's the problem of sovereignty. If you've heard the Spanish minister that we just heard, Luis de Guindos, the Spanish economy minister, he just said, we agree on this program, or on this austerity program, because we think it's the best for Spain. He didn't say it's because Brussels tells us to do it. They are trying to give the impression that they are still in charge, which is a problem because they are actually facing lots of threats to their sovereignty, one of them being, of course, the Brussels, and of course Germany, France, and the rest of European countries saying what to do if Spain wants help. So this is the problem. Maybe he's got a communication problem as well, but it's true that it's not an easy situation for him at all.
Right, a sovereignty issue that's coming to a head. Everyone in Spain, be they on the left or on the right, now deeply regretting that housing bubble that seems to have burst with a bang.
It was like a summer shower. The good times lasted 3 to 4 years, and the problems left behind will need decades to be solved.
Do you think, did you imagine, Eduard Salzas, a couple of years ago, that it'd be coming to this, where we'd be talking about, you know, the issue of sovereignty, where Spain finds itself having to give up some of its sovereignty, let the suits in to go over the books, this sort of thing?
I think Spanish people never imagined this could actually happen. And I still remember some years ago, Prime Minister Zapatero saying that we were actually catching up with Italy, the Italian economy. And I think that the country had like a common belief that we were becoming richer and richer, and actually nobody knew where that was coming from.
When did alarm bells first go off for you personally?
For me personally, I left Spain before thinking that this would happen, and so I saw this from abroad. But I would say like 2-3 years ago, I started to think that things would go wrong.
Sofiane Aboua?
I believe that what triggered this technical problem consisting in asking for a bailout. My personal belief, again, is that in July 2010, if I remember, the previous government, after the real estate bubble burst, decided to gather the 7 cajas within one simple structure called Bankia, which is the 4th bank in asset size in Spain. Therefore, he created, it was not the objective, of course, he wanted to restructure the sector, but he created a huge systemic risk because he added very...
He unwittingly created a bad bank?
Exactly. The Spanish government created a systemic risk by gathering 7 bankrupted banks. And Bankia bankrupt again under the Rajoy government, and this triggered the bailout demand.
No Bankia, no bailout needed today?
No, of course. I mean, of course not. I mean, I agree with Sofiane in the sense that Bankia was just the problem that actually was seen to the world, but should have the caixas been where they were before, which is not assembled, you still would have had the problem because you had seen this concentration, this extremely high acceleration of mortgages in the economy that was not sustainable. So of course it was a systemic risk, that pricked the bubble.
Exactly.
But everybody knew, if you had asked economists in the early 2000, everybody would say it's the milagro español, the Spanish miracle.
Per year, 4% growth per year.
Which everybody knew that was, highly unsustainable because it was out of thin air,
Exactly.
But the question now is indeed how do you see what are the impacts of this bubble in the economy? It's still not solved. Only 60% of the shock has been absorbed.
So we've seen the financial bubble burst. Now we're going to look at the political fallout when we come back in the France 24 debate.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information. Everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24, a different take on the news.